8. Moving on to topic number 9, we're going to stay in college football, but we're going to go a little bit more local here. The dawn of UMass, Don Brown, is heading back to the UMass Minutemen. UMass's football program has been in shambles. They have struggled as soon as they moved to the MAC and to, out of the FBS and into the BCS, and they really just haven't been competitive. So what do? They fire their coach, and then they bring back a guy who was a head coach at UMass a few years ago, who in the FBS, and was successful there, and then moved on and was a defensive coordinator for a ton of Power 5 schools. Don Brown was the DC at Maryland, UConn, Boston College, Michigan, and most recently Arizona. The guy has been a great defensive coordinator. He's been very successful. And one of the things that everybody's talking about right now, too, now that he's coming back to UMass, is he's a Massachusetts guy. And when he was even at Michigan, he was recruiting the best players from Massachusetts to go to Michigan. And that's the thing. We talked about this with the Florida schools last week. You got to recruit well in your state. You don't have to get everybody, but recruit well in your state. And UMass has to be, they're not going to recruit with BC, but they got to be like the next in line here in New England, not just in Massachusetts, but in New England, to get the best players out of this New England area. And Don Brown is going to do that. Don Brown is going to recruit. Don Brown also brings energy to the program. He's 66 years old. He's no spring chicken, but he's not that old either. I mean, he's gonna do a fantastic job there. I actually worked for the Northeastern football team when they still had a football team, and Don Brown was the head coach. And he did a fantastic job at Northeastern. Northeastern has no resources, or at least they don't now because they don't have a football team. But back then, even they didn't have great reach. They had a tiny stadium. They had small locker rooms. Not a great place to bring a recruit to visit. But he had great teams because of his recruiting ability and his coaching ability. He's going to bring that to UMass. He's developed guys that out of Michigan that are now really good NFL players. Rashawn Gary, Josh Uche, who's on the Patriots, who's a little bit undersized, but became a really good player, and then a second round pick in the NFL. He develops NFL players. You're going to start seeing guys coming out of UMass and going to the NFL because Don Brown's there.
Yeah, man. As soon as I heard this, I tweeted out like, great move by UMass football, bringing Don back. He's one of the best coaches in the business, a local guy that, hey, he'll tell you he loves New England. He loves Massachusetts, loves being around here. I believe he has a lot of connections to high schools here too, which is going to help him out a lot. A lot of these high school coaches are either, have connections to him, have worked with him, have worked for him, or just know him, have met him. I even said, I love this guy. I love how he goes to the coaching clinics. If you ever have been to one of the coaching clinics, he routinely puts on one of the best shows for a defensive coach. The room is packed. So I'll just tell a quick story about him. When I went to one of it was the big New England football clinic, and he was there. This is when he was at Michigan. He was the defensive coordinator at Michigan. First off, his defenses are routinely in the top 10 nationwide. So he is a defensive mastermind. Okay. So it's a defensive session. We go in there. The room is packed. I mean, standing room only. It seems like pretty much every coach in the dang clinic is in there at this point. And luckily I was in there early, so I got a seat. And I'll tell you what, I'm an offensive minded coach, but I'll tell you what, he started off his clinic with going, hey, are there any offensive gurus in here? Any offensive minded coaches? Raise your hand. I knew that was a loaded question. So I just sat there and I was nice and quiet. And I looked around being like, who's the idiot? Who's the idiot that's going to say they're an offensive guru to one of the best defensive coaches in the country? Luckily, these football coaches were smart. Nobody raised their hand. Nobody said a thing. And he goes, great, good. Because this is a defensive meeting. Get the F out of here if you're an offensive guy. Everybody just started laughing. It was so great. It was an amazing icebreaker. And then he got into his, clinic session about defense, where he was really talking about forcing the edge with forced defenders, which was just amazing. I learned a lot from him just in that 1 hour session. But he is such a great coach. Like you said, he is going to recruit hard here in Massachusetts and New England. I think he is going to, no doubt, improve this UMass football team. I think they're going to make waves here over these next few years, and they're going to make waves quick. But I've said over these last 30 years, that routinely UMass and Boston College lack in recruiting, especially here locally, where they let the best players here in Massachusetts go to other schools like Michigan, Rutgers, Penn State, even some of them going down to Florida to play. And I get it, Massachusetts, it's cold up here, it's snowing, but you've got some of the best players that even choose to go to UNH over UMass or Boston College. So I think they've both got to step up their recruiting. I think this is a clear choice that when you bring in Don Brown, the dawn of Massachusetts, the dawn of New England, the dawn of defense, that they are no doubt going to be getting some big recruits coming down the pipeline. I'm really looking forward to seeing what Don Brown can do with UMass football.
Yeah, Maurice Hurst, who was one of the top players in the state a few years ago, big defensive tackle. He went to Michigan, I believe, because Don Brown's there, a kid out of Massachusetts. Joe Graziano, who went to Northwestern a few years ago, one of the top players in Massachusetts, didn't stay and go to BC or go to UMass because they wanted to play. He wanted to play in the Big Ten. So the weather didn't matter. The climate didn't matter. It was that they didn't believe that, I think BC's doing a lot better. Jeff Hafley's doing a nice job, and I think he's going to keep doing that. He brought Jakovich over here from the Pennsylvania area, and BC's going to keep getting better as long as Hafley's there because he's doing a great job. And now UMass has that kind of, they still haven't been taken seriously as a BCS team. But when you bring in a guy, like Don Brown, who has a BCS pedigree, being from Michigan, just being in Arizona, going to Maryland, even being at BC, having one of the top defenses in the country when he was the DC defensive coordinator at Boston College, he brings a BCS football mentality to a place like UMass, who desperately needs that right now. They need to find their identity, and they need to, kind of stamp their approval of being in the BCS. People are still questioning if they should be at this level, So they have to kind of prove that this is the kind of guy that can do that. So I think Don Brown's great for UMass. Very well respected in New England, but across the country. So this is a no-brainer hire for the UMass Minutemen.
I think you're right. A lot of people are even questioning if the right move for them to move to FCS. They might be a better off team competing and recruiting in a smaller division per se. So I don't know. With Don Brown, he is going to answer those questions over these next few years, and UMass will find out if they do belong at the biggest, series in college football, or maybe they should think about going back. But it's really one of those things where I think once you bump up, you don't really ever want to go back because the money and the facilities and all that. It's tough to go back. But as far as that, you'll be a bottom feeder. And it's like one of those things like bottom feeder or find your footing. And that's really where they're going to find out the question, especially with Don Brown now as the head coach. Let's move on to topic number 10. And the final topic